going on, you guys? It's the FPL Penguin Calvin back again with another stream for you all. Hope you're all doing good. And in today's stream, it's another guest stream. And I'm joined by, all the way from Man on Pod, Darren and Craig. And also Mr. FPL Obsessed himself, Matt. Lads, how are we doing today?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you for coming on. So we'll get straight into it. Season almost here. Friday evening, deadline. It's going to be Crystal Palace Arsenal. We'll start off with an intro, like I usually do with my guests, like I did with Net That Hall, and also Adam and everybody else on news thing for the series of this guest streams. So, yeah, we'll get to know Man on Pod a bit more. Darren and Craig, there's four of you all together, but we've got two of you today on the stream. Yep. Tell us about Man on Pod. Tell us about yourself. How did Man on Pod come together? How did you guys, all four of you, meet?
Man on Pod came out of my genius creation. I think it was 4 seasons ago now, potentially. I decided to create a pod based on the fact I've played fantasy football games for about 20 plus years. Like even when you used to fill in the codes in a newspaper and phone in the telephone, I've played since then. I love Planet FPL and I love their 24-hour sort of stream they did and the Champman thing. So I thought, you know what, I've got the capability. Let's start a podcast. From there, I had 1 or 2 guests on. One of those guests was Thomas. He messaged me and said, I thought we had good chemistry. It was a really good pod. Have you ever thought about being a double act? I thought, actually, I had, not this quick, but I decided to do so, which was a great decision. And then last season, obviously, we took Martin and Craig on. We absolutely loved the way they did the sim data for Champman. Could see real potential in those two being an asset to the Man on Podcast. So decided to make it a 4-piece. It was my brainchild, and it has grown to 4 people. And I'm really happy with where it's gone and where it is at the moment, to be fair.
Awesome. What about you, Craig? Anything you want to add, Man on Pod?
Yeah, not really. I've played FPL since 2007, since I finished uni. Done fairly well over time, but never really had the confidence to pod about it. My background's more in writing than speaking. But then we played, Fantasy Championship Manager came around during lockdown, and there wasn't any pods or anything on that. So I thought, why not? I'll give it a go, little 20 minutes here and there. And they were quite well received. And then, Darren approached me started last season to maybe make it a more regular thing with those guys, and it seemed like a good idea. So it's gone from strength to strength from there. And yeah, we're doing okay these days. So gradually growing, getting there, get a bit more opinionated as the seasons go on. Those sorts of things.
Man on Pod, do check it out, guys. iTunes, Spotify. I just enjoy, along with like Planet FPL and Net That Hall, everybody, above the average. Great pods, great FPL pods. So many great pods out there. Do check them out. Also, let's move on now to Matt, FPL Obsessed. Matt, tell us about yourself. Tell us how long have you been playing FPL, everything. What made you want to create FPL Obsessed account? Tell us about yourself, mate.
So I've been playing FPL since 2004, so this will be my 19th season, I believe. And I've always been more obsessed with it than all of the people that I knew, even my friends who were really into FPL. I always seemed to I'd have good conversations with them, and then I'd notice that I'd reach that point where I'd just go beyond their level of interest, and I'd start to see eyes switching off and stuff. And I didn't actually discover the FPL community online. I didn't have Twitter until 2020. So I had no idea that there were, tens of thousands of nutters out there that, are as obsessed with it as I was. So that was great. That was great to discover, because it was quite lonely, being so obsessed with something and not having, a core group of people that were as passionate about it as you were. So finding the online FPL community was great. Like Craig, I'm a writer as well, but I used to have a very sort of busy day job working in the house building industry, and cut a long story short, I got a bit of a sort of long-term illness which drove me out of that job, and when I was in my sort of recovery phase of the illness, I was bored out of my mind. I was climbing the walls, and I just thought, you might never get this chance again, so why don't you spend this time doing what you're passionate about, which is writing. And then in terms of choosing a topic, the topic picked itself because, my next greatest passion was FPL. So I wrote a book on FPL, was supported very well by the FPL community. And that's it, really. That's all there is to tell.
Awesome. Thank you, lads. Thank you. It's great to get to know you a bit more, and for everyone watching as well. What we'll do now, we'll move on to the drafts now, kind of final plans and see where everybody is. We'll start off with Craig. Craig, I believe this is your team. Latest draft, should I say. Talk us through your latest draft, mate, your plans, anything that's worrying you that you're 50-50 about. Go ahead.
Nothing worrying me at the minute. I've been steady on this since Saturday, I think, which is... about how much tinkering goes on, that I've not moved for about 3 days now. So I'm guessing I'm fairly well set. The worry, we talked about a bit on Man On. Do I want Ederson in goal? The fact that Everson's just been added to the game at Leicester at 4 million gives you 2 Leicester goalkeepers at 4 million. Now that's something playing on my mind. Is that worth it? I don't particularly like Leicester's early fixtures, but can you look a gift horse in the mouth? 8 million for 2 goalkeepers rather than 9.5. So that's a decision I'll have to make whether I really like that. I want double Man City defence though, so if I do that, I'll have to probably move Gabriel to a Diaz or something, because I'm pretty set I want 2 Man City defenders. I think they're comfortably the best defence in the league, likely to keep the most clean sheets. I don't actually see too many people with 2, so I think there could be a little edge to be had there. I've been swinging and swaying a bit on Diaz and Robertson, as most people have been for Liverpool. I think the fact that Fulham are so bad defensively, haven't really got a squad, I think I'd rather have the extra attacking player for that game. I know Robertson does attack from fullback, but I think Liverpool scoring 3 or 4 is more likely than the clean sheet, if I'm being honest. I think I'm going to set on Diaz for that now. Other than that, most of the other positions haven't really moved for me for quite a while. I've had Kane since my first draft. I know that a few people have been sort of moving that way lately because of Haaland, but I've always had Kane. I'm sticking with that. Jesus, I've flirted with. The ownership's obviously really high, and there is an appeal going against that to try and gain an edge. But I think his recent form's just too good. And anyone else you oppose him with has got some I've got some reservations about. So I think I'll stick with Jesus. It's fairly template, this team. I think there's a few little differential players in there. I'm not a massive fan of Reece James either, but I'm not convinced by Perisic playing game week 1. I think I want Chilwell ideally, but he's unlikely to start game week 1 as well. So James is highly owned with potential for hauls and a decent price point to be a placeholder. So I'm happy to start with him with the intention of moving him to a Perisic or a Chilwell when it looks like they are likely to start. So I'm not the biggest fan of that position, but I think it's a safe move to put him in. Other than that, I think most of the rest picks itself based on pre-season and pricing, etc.
Yeah, it's very template, but it's the safest, a lot of the ownership and stuff. James, I still think, hearing the positive news for any people who want to go for Chelsea defenders, Calvert-Lewin's going to miss the game this weekend through injury, picked up an injury in training. So that's a plus. So it's another one of their attackers gone. Richarlison's gone, DCL injured. So I think going for James still, it's all about if he's going to play right centre back or if he's going to play, if they sign someone in time and attacking right back, who knows. But I think at the start I was a bit 50-50 with James. I think with the whole pre-season, I know some people say don't look too much into pre-season, but I think James could still be a good one to go for. And I think, they were unlucky against Everton last time out at Goodison Park. But I think this time around, Chelsea probably could get the job done. And I think James, for what he can do, if he starts at attacking right wing back, and there's no DCL there, where's the goal's going to come from for Everton? So I doubt the clean sheet could be ruined for Chelsea in that game. Like I said, he starts right wing back.
Worries me the 2 home games early on at Tottenham and Leicester, who've obviously both got pacey attackers in Son and Vardy. And I think they're the games where James is more likely to play centre-back when he's obviously the pace outlet at centre-back, the same way Man City have maybe used Walker there before. So obviously the home games are the ones you want him to play wing-back. And because there's big counter-attacking threat from Tottenham and Leicester, I think he may end up centre-back in those early games, which is not ideal either. I say it's just more, who else do I go for at that price point to cover it off? And I'm not always a fan of playing like high ownership. I'm usually a bit more punty than this, but I do think there is an element of staying with the pack early on and not doing yourself too much damage. And I'd like to think that this team should keep me sort of a top 500k or something through the early weeks, if not a little bit better. And then we'll maybe be a bit more punting differential after the first wild card.
Right, Matt, Darren, do you want to add anything to Craig's? Any questions?
I've spoken about Craig's quite a bit because he's part of the team. So no, I mean, I do like what you said about, obviously, I mentioned it to the guys last night when the Dominic Calvert-Lewin news broke. Like, does that make me want to get a Chelsea defender in again? Because I had them, and then their pre-season and everything was totally awful, and their Tuchel's body language and that, and I got rid of them. I did ask last night, but it hasn't convinced me. Although any team with just Rondon up front, but potentially, should you get a defender in, there's definitely a case for it. But no, I'm not going to. That's the only thing I would say with Chelsea is it's probably worth keeping now.
Matt, anything you want to add?
Yeah, one thing that I like about Craig's team is a lot of the sort of drafts that I've seen at the moment have the sort of standard burners on the bench. Whereas Craig's actually opted for Lewis Dunk instead of, say, a Nico Williams 4 million defender, which seems to give him a bit more flexibility, a bit more backup on the bench.
This team's got 0.5 spare, I think, as well. So
there you go. So premium goalkeeper, 0.5 in the bank, and an actual decent playing bench.
I'm hoping to play Dunk sort of for the first 7. I think it will work out as, obviously, game week 1 is not ideal. But he's not just there as a bench fodder. I think he will start a fair few weeks for me.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else you want to add, Craig?
No. We'll move on to someone else.
You're good. All right, we'll move on to Darren. Darren, move on to your team. Have a little scroll up. Talk us through your team, mate. What's happening? What are your plans?
So, I mean, my team has changed so many times. It's ridiculous now. As we've all had a little joke about through the Man On team. For me, what changed was I listened to the Planet FPL pod last night on 5 million defenders. Made me decide to change my defence quite a bit. I also decided that I could no longer go without Salah. As much as I was pretending it was cool and trendy, it wasn't a very good idea at all to even try and go without Salah. He's so highly owned. It's Fulham. Again, sorry to the Fulham fans, but it was stupid. And I spoke to the guys last night, quite late, messaged them and said, am I stupid to go without Salah? Majority, in fact, all 3 of them said, yeah, of course you are. So literally it was like, okay, I've got to get him in. So for me, I quite like the setup of my team. I've got a decent defense there. Zinchenko can come and go really, along with Nico Williams if they've got a decent game. I did think about taking Nico Williams out for someone like Vestergaard, who's 4 million, just because Leicester are probably a better team, but I don't know how nailed he'll be. And with Kasper Schmeichel going as well, I don't know how good that is in terms of a defense and keeping clean sheets. He's a set piece threat. Don't get me wrong, but is it worth it? I like my midfield now that I've got sort of Salah in it. I do miss Diaz. I did have him the whole way up until last night, but he's had to go because I didn't want double Liverpool, because I imagine that at one point I'm going to want to get Nunez in. I did have a draft with Nunez in as well. So I definitely think for me, I need to keep that slot open. Same for Man City. My game week 2 transfer is going to be Kane out and Haaland in. So I need to keep that Man City slot open. So that's why I've only got 2 City, 2 Liverpool. I'm just keeping my options open. I think you've got to go with an 8 million midfielder somewhere. I think Saka's the best bet. They've got a decent run, Arsenal, at the start. Kulusevski was the other one that interests me. And again, I think Tottenham do have a nice run at one point after about 4 or 5. So Saka could become Kulusevski. But there's so many ways you can go. You can get to Mount, etc. from there as well. And Sancho's in because they've had a great preseason. I thought he would be lively and have a much better season than last year. And he looks to be showing that in preseason. So, he's gone in. Bailey, Kane, Jesus, they've never left my team really from the start. Bailey at 5 million. As soon as he started playing preseason and doing well, 5 million, you're just not going to not put him in. And like I said, Kane and Jesus speak for themselves. They've been in my team. In fact, they're the only two that have never ever left a draft. The subs, we won't speak about them. I did have a strong bench before that. I think I had Dewsbury Hall on it. Zinchenko was on it originally because I had a better defender, and Trippier was on it as well, I think. So speaking with the guys, they said I had too much money on my bench as well. And to get Salah in and Kane, I've had to reduce that. So that's a very template subs bench.
We'll start with Craig. I know you guys are on the same pod together, but Craig, what's your thoughts? Anybody watching?
I like Sancho. Sancho's the player that's been sort of on the periphery of my drafts for a lot of the time. I think he played. I saw the whole of the friendly against Villa, and he was very lively in that game. And obviously, they didn't score in their latest friendly when he was ill. So I do think he's the most nailed of their midfielders. I'd quite like him. And I had him when I went for Robertson over Diaz in my own draft. But I've decided now I want Diaz. I think he is someone whose ownership could go up. He's a sort of player that could do well game week 1. You know what the Man United following's like in FPL community. If one of them does well, guaranteed price rise, I think, for whichever Man United player that is. I think he's more prone than most to be that player. So I like him. He's got a double Man City defence that I'd want. The 5 million defender is such an open debate. So Zinchenko's as good as anyone in that position. I haven't got any. Would I like to see one slightly stronger sub? Maybe. But again, that's maybe being a little bit picky. But the rest of it, I think, he probably could drop Sanchez to a 4 million and then upgrade Nico Williams or something. I'd probably rather do that if it was me. But you're not going to drop Mendy, I don't think, for any of the games, are you, to play Sanchez? So it's kind of a bit of a wasted money on the bench.
I think only game week 2, potentially, when Chelsea play Tottenham. I think Brighton have got a decent fixture in 2. So that might be the only swap I make for the goalkeepers is like game week 2. But that's it. Otherwise, no, Mendy's pretty much nailed for the season.
Matt. Wait, who was that? Anybody else? I thought somebody said something there. Sorry. Matt, you got anything to add to?
Yeah, not too much. As Craig mentioned, I'm a bit of an old man when it comes to FPL. I'm a bit cautious, so I'd like to probably have seen a slightly stronger bench if it was my squad. I like the Saka pick at 8 million. He's been sort of floating around my thoughts quite a lot, and I think based on the other night where he took a penalty, and I know that it could be because he earned the penalty, and there's that sort of friendly aspect to it. But I think that's a slight increase in confirmation that he'll be on pens. But we'll have to wait and see for that one. But I was looking at Saka's underlying statistics, and when you look at them per 90 compared to some of the other 8 million midfielders. There's nothing too great in all that, but one thing that stood out to me is that he excelled in the number of attempted assists per 90 out of all of the 8 million. Now, if Arsenal had a better point man, better focal point of the attack, which they now do in Jesus, you could see a lot more of those attempted assists being converted into actual FPL assists. So I think with Jesus being in the squad, in the Arsenal team, he increases the appeal of having Saka. My only other comment is Walker. He seems a great way into the City defence at 5 million, but I just don't know if you're automatically booking a future transfer in there if the minutes don't happen for him. That would be my only concern. But if he does, then he's great value at 5 million.
Okay. We'll move on now. Move on to Matt's team. Matt, let's talk about your team. What are your plans? Your battle plans, everything. Talk to your team. What's going on? Are you near enough there, would you say?
Well, yesterday, I was actually worried about coming on this live stream because I was absolutely locked in. And obviously, when you come on to a stream with other people that know FPL, you can get your head turned, and I didn't want it yesterday. I didn't want someone to talk me out of what I'd got. But today I'm a bit more open-minded because I foolishly assumed that I was locked, and today I've started tinkering again, which is really annoying, but that's the way it is. So if I can open up by commenting on the structure. So where my heart has been is I really like 5-3-2. but my head has been 4-4-2 in terms of formation. And what I actually had was the sort of generic bench burners in all of the positions. So Nico Williams, Archer or Greenwood, and Pereira. Because I was seeing it so much, it just became standard. But there was something about it that I didn't like. And what I realized is I really wanted the flexibility to be able to switch between a 5-3-2 and a 4-4-2. So what I actually did was I changed things around so that I could upgrade one of my fifth defensive slot to Gabriel, which is actually currently white at the moment because I like to have 0.5 in the bank. And actually, Neto and an Arsenal defender rotate extremely well up until game week 8, which is when I think I'm likely to play my wild card. So what you do is actually start off with Neto, and when Neto has his difficult fixtures, which I think are game week 3 and 7 and 8, is you can actually interchange those. So you switch in between a 5-3-2 and a 4-4-2 to avoid those difficult fixtures, and I really like that. So that's where I've ended up at the moment. My locks are Trent, Cancelo, Alexander-Arnold, Salah, Diaz, Kane, and Jesus. As Craig alluded to before, of my locks, James is probably the one that's most expendable, but he'll probably end up staying just simply for the fact that there's nothing that I like at the 6 million price point in defence. There's no real alternative, but I've lost a bit of trust in Chelsea at the moment. So that's where I was yesterday. Now I've sort of come full circle and I'm considering going back to a Nico Williams on the bench. Basically, I've got big FOMO over Bailey. I remember last season when everyone was making loads of noise about Ben Rama, and I just wasn't interested, and I didn't go for him, and he absolutely banged, and my rank plummeted, and it was really frustrating. And I'm getting similar vibes now. He's appearing in more and more people's drafts. You know, they're up against Bournemouth in game week 1, who are absolutely depleted in terms of their squad. Some of the noises, that's being made from the Bournemouth camp, are not filling me full of any sort of faith. So I'm looking at ways to potentially get Bailey in and perhaps even upgrade Pereira, so that I would actually have 2 decent bench players. But then I'm inviting in a rotation headache, and potentially leaving points on the bench every week. So I've gone from being locked yesterday to utterly confused today. Please feel free to rip it apart and give me your suggestions.
Yeah, you would talk about Ben Rama. It was start of last season, wasn't it? I remember bringing him straight away. I was watching him on the eye test because I'm more of an eye test sort of guy, and and I just noticed that early form he was doing well, and then he did well, and I brought him in, and he was getting some good points after that for the next few matches. Bailey could be. We'll get Craig's thoughts on Villa a bit later on. But yeah, Bailey could be something. It could be a right gem. He's done decent pre-season. Depends where he's going to be in Gerard's plans. It's pretty much template. You got Diaz in there. You got Salah and Trent. Would you not prefer in Robbo instead of Diaz, Matt, or do you, because you're a Liverpool fan just like myself, or do you not think Robbo's not?
I think it's one of those decisions that could end up being much of a muchness in terms of points output over a given period. What I think is that it becomes a question of what's your preferred structure. So yeah, I think if anyone goes for Robbo, absolutely. I've been tempted myself, but I quite like the balance of price points of my defensive line. If I put Robbo in, then I think it's kind of a difficult option to then jump off if you decide to change your mind. Whereas having Diaz offers you a bit more flexibility.
The thing that swung me eventually with Diaz was the fact Yotta's out. Was he back training in 2 weeks? So that's the main rival for a starting spot gone. Exactly. So he'll still get subbed off in games, undoubtedly, but he's likely to start the most of them now. No Europe yet, so there's no reason to rotate because of that. And I think the teams they're playing earlier on, teams that are liable to concede goals rather than, I say, especially in Fulham's case, I think they're more likely to get absolutely smashed than had the clean sheet locked in. So I think it's just a bit of everything. The stars have just aligned a little bit for Diaz. I was very much Robertson for about 2 weeks, but the realization of all of that, I think, made me think Diaz has got so much upside in these games. So I'm quite happy that everyone's been ditching him after not doing very much against the best defence in the league in the Community Shield. Has sort of swung some heads, haven't they, away from him?
Yeah.
But
any thoughts, Darren? You want to add? Any questions for Matt?
No, I quite like it, actually, to be fair. I understand what he said at the very start about having a stronger bench for myself, in all fairness, and he's got a slightly better bench than I have. And maybe it's a, as you said, an old person's thing in terms of I hate having a weak bench, but every single time I went to the guys and said, what do you think of this team? They were like, your bench is too strong. And it's like, but that's what I like. And I've gone against that this year simply through looking at people's teams and speaking to the guys. And this is the first time I've looked at my bench and thought it's really weak. I quite like your bench, in all fairness. Martinelli is a guy I've seen in a lot of people's drafts. And now we know that Emil Smith-Rowe's definitely not going to play the first or second game, I think it is. He's injured. Martinelli does come nailed on. So I really do like that shout. I was never convinced about him at all. I much prefer Saka. The only one I don't particularly like, and I've said it before on the pod, is Neto. But I can understand why people are going with him. Now we know that Jimenez is injured and he's only 5.5 and he's been a decent attacking threat every season. I'm just not a fan of Wolves in general in terms of attacking assets. It's just a personal thing. But I do think he is one of the better players. And in fact, before we even started, before the game opened, I even think I mentioned like Neto would be on my radar, but I've just gone off of them. But I think when you talk about fear of missing out, I think Neto's one guy potentially that makes me have that. Otherwise, I reckon that's a really, really solid team. I really like what you're doing with the formation change as well between 5-3-2 and 4-4-2. It's definitely something I've looked at as well. When I had a slightly stronger bench before, that was going to be my idea. Even from here, you could go 3-4-3 if you could get a better striker. So you've definitely got options. You've left yourself very, very nice. Is there anything in the bank with that one?
So in the one that you see on the screen, I've got Gabriel, and that locks in all of the budget. But what I've done is I've downgraded him to white to give me the 0.5 because I just I'm a big fan of having that money in the bank again. Old and boring. Make sure you save your pennies.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing I don't have either. Is I don't have anything in the bank, and that's slightly scary as well. But no, I really like it. I think it's a nice draft. I wouldn't say it's completely template. I'd say it's moved away a little bit in terms of Martinelli and Neto. I don't think they're hugely owned. And Matty Cash I quite like as well. He's been in a lot of mine.
You've called the wrong three people on together, Calvin. We've all got Kane and Jesus up front. So no Haaland to argue about, no Perisic to argue about. Sort of.
Damn it, guys! I was hoping for a differential teams here.
I was going to say the Haaland thing is really simple for me. First game, new team. West Ham away is not a pushover. You've got Kane at home against Southampton. Like, it's a no-brainer for me. And then the next game, you've got Haaland at home against Bournemouth, who we know are terrible, and Scott Parker, their manager, even says we're terrible. It's a no-brainer for me. That was always going to be my move, was we're going to Kane to Haaland in game week 2. I don't see why, if anyone's starting with Haaland, it's because they don't have a plan at all within game week 2 to move him on, or they're just loving that new person, and it's Haaland. We know about Haaland. They've got romantic with it, but from that first game week, I don't see him getting much.
People are just very reluctant to. Everyone wants to hold transfers for some reason. I think people forget that we don't have to use them. You could burn them, but everyone doesn't like pre-booking in transfers. I can understand that your goalkeeper might get sent off, or someone might get injured, or something like that. Especially if you've got a weak bench, that you might want to transfer to deal with one of those sort of crises. But I've got no issue with sort of having 2 or 3 early season transfers in my head. I'm not saying I'll go through with all of them. But the reason most people are going with Haaland seems to be, I don't want to book in a transfer for game week 2. I'll need that. And I don't necessarily agree that's the right approach.
Yeah. My plan also is to book in that first transfer, Kane to Haaland in game week 2. And I actually have sympathy for the argument of not booking in transfers, because as a sort of risk-averse, patient manager, I tend to save my transfers for putting out fires, and there tends to be more fires to put out at the start of the season. But I think there's an argument this season with the World Cup wildcard, if you want to call it that, that we can break the season into more manageable chunks. And I think for me, someone who's quite boring and patient in the way that I play, to maximize on this season and not get left behind, I think I'm going to have to change a little bit the way that my playing style and be a little bit more aggressive. And if that means booking in a transfer in game week 2 to maximize points over premium strikers, then I think it's a good idea. I have no problem doing it this season.
Right, we'll move on now to my draft. This is going to be, I think Craig might really like it. So yeah, you're going to love it. All of you pick it apart and just roast it and just absolutely destroy it. But this is what I've come up so far. This is on the screen. 0.5 in the bank. I'm like Matt. Did start last season. Got his book. Shout for FPL Obsessed book. Matt's book. Very good read. But yeah, I like the fact of having a bit of money in the bank. It's always helpful. Maybe I'm turned into an old man now. I'm 27, but save my pennies. But yeah, no, listen, it's always good to have a bit of money in the bank. And then just for the early game weeks, if price rises, it's always bad to be like 0.1 out, isn't it? And then trying to bring someone in. So the goalkeeper, I've got Meslier in. I think more and more every single few days in a week, every week, I'm more confident of keeping him in my side, seeing good stats, especially from Matt. We'll have a bit of talk about if we have time from his tweets. He's done a thread the other day about Leeds. First few game weeks, barring Chelsea, looked pretty decent. I think Leeds have, I know they lost 2 big players in Rafinha and Calvin Phillips, but I think sounding like Rocker, it's just better player, Sinisterra from Feyenoord, let's pronounce the name. And it's all about if they adapt well. Aronson doing well for Leeds as well, the American lads. Bamford, a fully fit Bamford, that's what they missed last season. He was injured for periods of last season. He was getting the goals. They were putting Daniel James, who's not someone who's going to get goals, as a false number 9 up front. Bamford is that player they need fit and healthy throughout the season to get them goals, help get them goals, because they've got like Jack Harrison on the other side who can get goals, doing some good crosses, good passes to Bamford. And as long as they keep Bamford fit, they'll have a much better season than last season. Meslier, I think he's a good one to go for. I actually prefer him over Ryan Sanchez and the 5 million. I'm just going to go, I'll just show you the bench as well. I've gone for Ward because Schmeichel, I think he's gone or he's going to Nice. They haven't signed another, don't know if they're going to sign another goalkeeper in time. They've got Iverson, I think his name is the other keeper for Leicester. So I'm going to keep Ward there. He could be a playing 4 million keeper, starting 4 million keeper. Nico Williams, Crystal Palace defender, and Andreas. But yeah, as I said, I've got Trent. He's a lock. He's staying in there along with Salah. Cancelo in there. Also got Luca Dean and Cash and Bailey from Craig's Aston Villa beloved team. And then we've got Saka, who I much prefer over Martinelli. He's 2 million less. I just prefer Saka because Saka takes the set pieces. To me, on the eye test, he looks better. He looks better as a player. He got some decent stats last season, and he's such a key player for Saka. And I just feel like between him and Martinelli, I know we've got the 5 sub rule this season. That's going to be fun, isn't it? I think Saka's more safer than Martinelli. Safer, just a bit more safer. Saka. So I've got Sar's captain. Then I've got Bailey. I think I'm going to have FOMO over not owning Bailey. I think he's kind of impressed me. It's all about if he starts. But the benefits of the 5 sub rule, even if he's on the bench and he comes on, like say the 75th or 70th, 65th minute, he's got a chance to maybe get some returns because of the 5 sub rule. He's got a chance, 2 extra chances of trying to come onto the fields. Mount's a weird one. I think I'm just getting. I'm still messing around with. I'll tell you my other plans in a minute. My other draft, what I could decide to do. But Mount's just in there as probably as a placeholder at the minute because I know he's got Everton, and maybe it would be nice to have a Chelsea player for that Everton game. I just think Everton is still atrocious to watch, and I think they're still in for another tough season, could be in that relegation sort of scrap. I know I'm biased as hell because of Liverpool, but I still think Frank Lampard's still got his work cut out for him and everything. Jesus and Kane, obviously Jesus is going to stay in there. He's over 70%. I mean, it's just incredible to see a player like Jesus, a bargain price. It could be a real bargain price at 8 million, but it's over 70%. Harry Kane in there too. Sorry, someone say.
Sorry, do we know what the top ownership percentage is, the record? Because he's at 72.7% at the moment.
See, I was asking that the other day. I think somebody told me, I think it was Bluebird FPL or something, that it was Salah before he went to the AFCON, he was at 70 something. I don't know what it was exactly, but I think Salah is the highest ever I think it was the AFCON, before the AFCON kicked off.
Crazy numbers.
Yeah, so go back quickly. The Kane Haaland thing is really bugging me. Do I go for, because a lot of people like this, do we start with Kane and then do the whole thing, do a transfer to Haaland in game week 2, or do we stick with Haaland? Because to me, I'll be honest with you, I love both of them. I think Haaland, even though I'm a Liverpool fan, I think Haaland, even though he did kind of miss the sitter in that Community Shield, he did look lively. He did look lively, probably against Bayern Munich. I think he's clicking well. He'll click well with probably Grealish and Kevin De Bruyne and stuff. I have no doubt I think he'll do really, really well, Haaland. And this is coming from a Liverpool fan, and that's what I kind of fear as well. But as long as Nunez does better, but as long as Nunez did win the bloody Community Shield as well. So I just quickly get Craig's thoughts on the triple Villa. What's your thoughts on Cash, Dean, and Bailey? Too much or?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. If you're playing the fixtures, I think first 2 we're as good as anyone. 3 and 4 aren't bad. Then it drops off a cliff after 4. So you'll have transfers obviously to move at least 1 or 2 of those on at that point. I don't hate it. We can do a Villa little digest in a minute if you want of which one's better. Meslier is the only one. I noticed that Matt had him as well. I'm not sold on Leeds' defence. They're playing Harrison at left back at the minute because they haven't got enough defenders. They've let in 2 goals in the last friendly against a second division team from somewhere. It's a lot of reliance, I think, on save points, which you could get, but I don't really see them keeping too many clean sheets at all. So it doesn't really tick the box for me for a cheap keeper who could double up with the save points and the clean sheets. I've gone the other way, to be fair. I've got Edison, who's going to get clean sheets and not a lot else. And to me, you've got Meslier, who's going to get save points and not a lot else. So could he get a load of save points because they steal an odd clean sheet? Maybe, but with an attacking player at left back because there's no one else and the defenders that I'm not fondest of at the best of times, I think he's a big avoid for me. But I've seen him in quite a lot of teams. I do kind of get why, but personally, I'm not a fan of him.
Just before we move on to Darren and Matt's thoughts as well, the other, what I said, my other draft could have been, I've just written it down. This other draft would also have 0.5 in the bank as well. So the players that moved from this team on the screen to the players that I would like to go for. I'd really like Nunez. Great to get Matt's thoughts on Darwin Nunez as well, what he's seen so far on Darwin. I'd really want him. I think he's at like 20% now, Darwin, and I think just like Haaland, he's starting to click. And I think with Darwin, just like Luis Diaz for us, he adapted quickly. He just to our team, to the Premier League. I think Darwin's got that. I think he's going to be a very, very good signing for Liverpool. I'm biased as hell, but I think Klopp's really, and his backroom staff have really found a really good player. Thanks to Luis Suarez as well. Probably wink go to Liverpool. But I do feel a bit of like from Darwin, a bit of prime Fernando Torres, a bit of Luis Suarez in there with him. He's a big character, about 6'2". You know, he was heading a few off the ball crosses towards goal in that Community Shields. So I think he could be a very, very good signing. 9 million. So basically what I could do, so changing this team a bit, that would still have me 0.5 in the bank. I could do, say, the 0.5 forward to that's on the bench to Darwin, and then move Mount to De Silva from Brentford. Then either move Cancelo to Diaz, or I can keep Cancelo, then either get rid of Cash or Luca Digne for a 4.5 defender instead. I could do that instead. That's more way to get Darwin in my team and then have like Jesus Darwin and Kane up front. So basically have a 4-3-3 formation instead of a 4-4-2. What's your thoughts on that, Matt, on Darwin, and also what I've just said about getting Darwin in?
I'm naturally, from an FPL perspective, I'm naturally skeptical of players who have only just come into the Premier League or who have no proven Premier League pedigree. It's why Haaland has not been in any of my drafts. It's why I've not been tempted by Perisic yet. Obviously, his age and expected minutes are a factor there as well. These are players that I admire, on an international level or from what I've seen, in other leagues. But I think people can underestimate just how good the Premier League is and how high the standard is. And it's a reason that I wasn't tempted by Werner when he came over from the Bundesliga and everyone was really excited by him. I went for Jamie Vardy instead. So I try to apply that level of sort of cynicism to, Liverpool transfers as well, even though I'm a Liverpool fan. And it's funny, it's a bit of a mixed bag because obviously what I've seen in pre-season and floating around online, there's a lot of rival fans rubbing their hands with glee and putting together compilations of Nunez miskicking the ball and spannering it over and stuff like that. And you try not to let that sort of stuff affect you, but once you've seen it, it's visual and it lodges in your mind. But then obviously he goes and bangs them in pre-season. But I think the Community Shield performance was a big game changer for me because that's where it counts. When you play in reasonably full strength squads, you're playing one of the best defenses in the league. And what hit me was that he just seemed to suck the ball towards him. He totally changed the dynamic. He was getting into some great positions. I think and I hope that he's going to be one of the players like Luis Diaz who just hits the ground running. Maybe needs a bit of improvement to his fitness and his sharpness, and to just adapt to the little nuances of the Premier League. But I as an FPL asset, he is a wait and see rather than a must have at the moment. I've especially at his price point, it's just an awkward one. I think if you're not going to get rid of Jesus and you're locked with either Kane or Haaland, then to get Nunez in, you're talking about a significant redistribution of funds away from your team to fit him into some sort of, 3 up top formation. And then again, you come back to there's so much value in the defensive positions. Midfield is historically the position that attracts the most points. So I think to get Nunez in, you're perhaps having to sacrifice elsewhere, maybe a little too much for my liking.
Yeah, just before we move on to Darren. So basically, like I said before, spoke to Matt, those moves, if I did do them, and like I said, basically the team would be a 4-3-3 formation. It would have Meslier, Trent, Cancelo, Luka Dean, and then a 4.5 defender. And then I have Saka, Salah, and Bailey in that 3-man midfield. And then up front would be Jesus, Darwin, and Kane. That's what it would look like if I did do it that way and still have 0.5 in the bank. Yeah. You want to get Darren? Darren, what's your thoughts? Rip it apart, mate. What's anything here?
So I've had Kane, Jesus, and Darwin in a draft already. Like I had, or a few of them. I really like him. What put me off was, to be fair, Craig. Craig says he doesn't believe that Darwin will start the season. He doesn't think he'll play the first game. He thinks Firmino will play the first game, with potentially Darwin coming on, let's say, 65th minute. So he'll get time, but he thinks he'll be eased in, which it could happen. Absolutely. I can see why. He certainly didn't start the game, the Community Shield, did he? So we will see there, but he's definitely one on my watch list. I think he's quite exciting. I go back to what Matt said about the videos of him missing and fluffing chances. There was another video to counter that. Like, that's an agenda video to put you off him and say, oh, look at him, he's a massive Liverpool flop. It's an agenda video. That's all it is. There was a video to counter that where he was in training and he was smashing them and all angles, and it looked amazing. And I was like, so I never buy into those people who do that type of stuff on Twitter. It's just not worth it. No. It's just a very team agenda driven type thing they do. So it's pointless. he's crept up in terms of ownership simply because people are getting scared of going without him. I think when I first looked, he was like 4 or 5%. Then he was like 10. Now he's up to 20, and he's just starting to creep into more people's thoughts. And I can understand why. With him, Jesus, and Kane, the team just gets very unbalanced. That's the problem. 3 premium, sort of, let's call Jesus a premium, 8 million kind of strikers there is difficult to make anything of the rest of the team. But for me, he's definitely going to look to come in, I think. And like I said, when I looked at my team, that's why I had an extra Liverpool spot simply for him. In terms of the Aston Villa, I think someone in the comments put too much Villa. I wouldn't say too much Villa. Like, you look at their first 3-4 games. Yeah, there we go. FPL Sandwich Podcast, too much Villa. Yeah. I don't disagree there's too much Villa there. I just wouldn't have the double defence. So for me, I had Watkins in a draft. And I quite like Ollie Watkins. I would prefer their attacking more than their defending. That's all I would say. So Matty Cash has been in mine. So has Digne before. But for me, I certainly wouldn't have the double up in defence of a Villa. Even with those first 3 games, they definitely can leak a goal in. So for me, I would potentially just change one of those 2. That's the only thing I do. But I can understand with the fixtures or the FDR, for instance, it definitely looks appealing. But Craig's point of come game week 4 or 5, the next 3 are awful. And you're probably going to want to, make a change there. So you're kind of already booking yourself a transfer in that part. But otherwise, I kind of really like it. Mount, I really like Mason Mount. I had him a lot last season. I think he's a really good player. I just can't pick between Chelsea attacking assets. Who's going to be that great? And I've seen nothing in pre-season that made me think I need Mason Mount. I would prefer, the one thing that was glaring to me, apart from Kane, is potentially maybe getting another Tottenham asset in because they've got good games, and maybe changing Mount to Kulusevski. That's all I would potentially look at doing. But otherwise, again, it's very similar, isn't it, to everyone? We've all got like 7-8 players the same.
Yeah. Right. We'll move on. As we're near the end of the video, we'll talk about one more thing, and that's Craig's beloved team, Villa. Do you want to just give us a bit of what we can expect from Villa this season? Players to watch, and Cash and Digne. You want to talk about them as well?
We'll do Cash and Digne first. I think this year, the big talking point from Villa is that Gerrard had a tried and tested structure and formation at Rangers that obviously worked really well for them. I would argue for most of last year, we didn't have the players to work in the way he wanted to. Bailey, I think, is a critical part of that. At Rangers, they tend to have 2 wide players. One was more a wide player who drifted infield. That was Joe Aribo under Gerrard, that was on the right, drifted inside. And the other winger, which was Ryan Kent, was more of a direct runner that ran in behind. We didn't really have any wide pace, I would say, last year. All of our players, Buendia was played out there, Coutinho was played out there. They all wanted ball to feet. We didn't really have any runners. Bailey's obviously changed that in pre-season, and he's the only player really in our squad that can do that role. So he's obviously injury prone. I would say last year the good news was that the injuries he picked up were all different. If he was struggling with the same hamstring injury 3 times, I'd be quite concerned. But the fact that it was a groin once and then a calf once, I think, makes me put it down to more bad luck than repetition. So I think he plays. I think 4-3-3 is what Gerrard played at Rangers. And managers, I think, try and replicate what's worked at other clubs before. So I think that's ideally what he wants to play. There'll be games we play 4-4-2 with a diamond midfield. I'm sure there'll be games we play sort of 4-3-2-1 with 2 number 10s. It will be opposition dependent. But I think our plan A formation will be 4-3-3. It will be Coutinho on the left, drifting inside, and Bailey on the right, with more of a aim to sort of run in behind. I think he'll end up running in behind Watkins more than not. His main task literally is to make forward runs. He's one of those players that will do more off the ball than with it. When he gets it, he'll dribble. But his main run will be that sort of outside right, in between the fullback and centre back, to try and attack the middle of the goal. So I really like him. I don't think it's much of a risk at 5 million. If it doesn't work out, if you've got a decent first sub, you bench him. I don't even think you have to worry about where you jump off. I know there's not a lot of options at that price point, but I think you can just bench him at 5 million if you've got a decent first sub, especially if you've got a wild card fairly soon. I expect him to be a big goal threat, and him and Watkins will be tasked to get into the box. That means all of our creativity, I think, will come down the other flank, which is obviously the left. Coutinho will be down that side. Jacob Ramsey will be down that side, and Digne is down that side as well. And I think the task is Cash is the goal scorer. He'll be another one that sort of gets in the box, and Digne will have more of the ball. I think we could be a bit lopsided in build-up, and the game will be Coutinho will drift in field to sort of start as a left forward, end up playing more as a number 10, try and drag players around, and Digne will get around the outside of him to the byline and cut crosses back. Now, it depends what your appetite is. Do you want the fullback with a bigger goal threat, which will be Cash? Do you want the fullback who will take some set pieces, will cross more balls into the box? Defensively, I don't think there's much in it. Cash gets booked more. I think I'd probably edge in towards Digne. I think he'll be more likely to get assists than Cash will to score. But I don't hate either of them. Would I go for both of them? Probably not, but they probably are our second and third best assets after Bailey. Coutinho could do well. Watkins could do well. But I think we'll be a bit better defensively. Kamara as a DM is a big signing for us. He was very open through DM last year. We tried to play Douglas Luiz there. That's not his position. Did a job, but he wasn't most efficient in that role. So I'd expect us to be better in stopping teams just run right through the middle of us, which should obviously make us a bit less prone to conceding goals. And Diego Costa, I think, is an upgrade in all of our centre back. Diego Carlos, even, not Diego Costa. Don't want to play in that centre back. So we've got a better centre back. We've got a DM, which we haven't really had since Gerrard come, and we've got a sort of a different sort of attacking threat with Bailey that we didn't have. So to me, he's been a lock in my team. He scored 3 goals in pre-season, and he's only played 45 minutes in most of the games. It's important he's at the whole pre-season, no sort of reoccurrences of injuries. And I think he's just different to all of our other attacking players, and that should mean he starts. So he's in. Fullback-wise, I wouldn't put you off one. I'd probably slightly favour Digne, but I've got neither. I've got Gabriel in that slot in my team, just because I don't want to make a transfer in that position. I can hold him into a wild card where I would feel like I'd have to transfer out the Villa fullback in game week 4 or 5, and that I don't particularly want to book a move in at that price. But one of them, both of them could do well. I don't know what else you want to know. Is there any other? Are you confident about the season? Where do you think you'll finish? And any more improvements transfer wise? Do you think Aston Villa should dip into the market before it shuts this season? I don't think we desperately need anyone else. I'd like to think we'll be competing for Europe. I think that's the agenda. I think that's what's been sold to Carlos and Kamara. It did seem like there was Champions League interest from both of those two, and Gerrard's obviously persuaded them to come to us. So they've obviously sold the dream that we're pushing for top 6, top 7. I think it's squad-wise, it's got to be the aspiration. We've got to be level with the likes of West Ham, Newcastle, squads like that. I think we're arguably a bit stronger in some cases. So I think top 8's got to be the target. I think top 6 is a dream, but is one that is possible if one of the big 6 make a mess of something. And we've got a bit more depth than last year. So the two big positions we struggled was at centre back and at DM. We've covered both of those roles. We've got Bailey back, who feels like a new signing because we signed him. He played about 4 games and got injured. We barely saw him again, so it feels like a bit of a new signing. And we've got a full season of Gerrard. We didn't have that. We was obviously trying to put right all of the things that he felt was wrong with what Dean Smith had done before that. So I think there's every reason to be optimistic. Come talk to me again after game week 4 when we've got about 3 points through the opening 3 games, and I'll probably feel a bit differently. But
yeah, right. It should be an interesting season for Villa. Of course, it's going to be the first 3 games going to be very, very interesting for you. But we'll wrap things up, lads. Thank you so much for popping on, and everyone that's watched in this stream as well. But yeah, Craig, Darwin from Man on Pod. Please do check that out. Great listen. But yeah, do check them out on YouTube. Give them a follow on Twitter, and also Matt as well, FPL Obsessed. Give me a follow on Twitter as well. But lads, thank you, all 3 of you. Thank you for taking the time popping on. Been great chatting to you, and all the best for the new season. And see you later, guys. Take care.